everyone has different like father dynamics, and I grew up in a culture where you were at home with your father, or if your parents were split, you still had him in your life. But it was like that. My father didn't grow up with his father, and he had to become a father at 13 for for his younger brothers. So he's never known the difficulty of being a son. So how does someone who's never been a son understand a son and father that son? So that's why I think the story speaks so well, because it brings that group of people together, and that group is much larger than we think. Hi, my name is Nicholson Thibault, also known as Nick. I am a director, deacon, professor at Emerson College, and this is my faithly
Could
story.
you tell me how your faith journey started?
My faith journey started growing up Christian. My parents came from Haiti in 1992 or 93. We started in Brooklyn. I was born in the later part of 93, November. And then we moved to Boston, I'd say 6 to 8 months after that. And they've always been in the faith. They've always grown up. But, as most kids, we go to church because our parents bring us to church. It wasn't until I really had an encounter at 14. I was at a young adult service. Again, should I have been there? My brother was a young adult, so I kind of snuck in with him. And I just remember sitting in the back, and the worship leader had an altar call, and there was just this burning sensation. I've seen my parents pray, I've seen my brother pray, I've seen, other leaders pray, but it was actually the first time that I had my own encounter with the Lord. And I just walked up to the altar, kind of like stayed on the side, but I just remember falling to my knees, and that was the first intimate, personal moment I had with Jesus Christ. And from there, I jumped right into youth ministry at my church. I joined the choir and did the choir for a few years. Eventually became a youth leader around, I want to say 18 or 19. Did that for a couple more years. Then I transitioned in 2016 from my Haitian church to Jubilee Christian Church, where I just continued to serve. So since 14, I've been at it. So more than half of my life, I've had a great relationship with the Lord, and it's still growing to this day. We're still reaching new depths, still finding more about Him, discovering more about myself. So yeah, that's where it kind of started. Long story, short.
What happened at 14? Because a lot of times I listen to people's stories.
Hmm.
Like when you go deeper, like something led to that moment. And so I'm curious to you, like what at 14 or something about the preaching that you heard that made you like go? Or was it just an internal like pull and you were just listening to your
Whew.
spirit?
I've never actually taken the second, but I think what I'm remembering about that year was at 14, that's when you were eligible to join the youth choir. At 14, that's when you transition from like the kids ministry into the teenage youth ministry. And I remember always wanting to be wherever my brother was and kind of like tagging along with him. He was my guy. He's about 3.5, 4 years older than me. So he's already been doing youth ministry much longer than me. And I was just curious. I think I was exhausted of just doing the ritual, reciting verses because that's what my parents want me to do, singing from the hymns because that's what we do on Sunday morning. I think I reached a curiosity with what is these encounters that everyone's having around me, and I'm just kind of like standing there with my eyes closed, but like peeking up every now and then. It was just, God, why not talk to me? Why not, have a relationship with me? And I didn't know what was stopping it. I didn't know what was repelling it, but it was just a worship night that my brother was singing at, and he invited me, and I said, no, let me go. I'll probably have more fun, see some more friends. Um, it was just that draw close to me, and I'll draw close to you. I feel that's what's kind of resonating right now. That's what that moment was I had asked, and I finally gotten a response. And in that moment, I just took the step of faith and said, I'm going to follow this voice wherever it's going to lead me. And now I've been doing that since. So I think that's what was going on at 14. I was just generally curious. I think it was an interesting year. It was my first year of high school. So that was a transition. High school, there's a lot of culture that happens, and I could have easily fell into more worldly spaces, but I was happy to be the Christian at school. And I love that I went into my freshman year solidified with my relationship with Christ.
So what were your high school years like as a Christian? Because like the way I understand my story and other people's story that like grew up in the church, they were like very Christian and doing all these Christian clubs. But like in college, that all goes away. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious as to
Ooh,
like is that a standard thing for most Christians? But for you, like did you become
no,
a
it
super
wasn't.
apostle?
No, it wasn't. I'm more so action than talk. So I didn't go to any of the parties. I stayed away from any kind of substance. Anytime, there were certain activities that were happening in high school, everyone would just know, oh, Nikki's probably not going. He probably has some kind of church thing. And for my first year, it definitely felt like, wow, I'm missing out on something, or being made fun of because I'm choosing to go to Bible study or youth night instead of going to these, simple, really, like homecoming or multicultural night. And for me, I was so new in the faith, I didn't yet have the discernment to know what's good and what's really too away from what God's standard was. So I just chose, if I don't feel right about it, if I don't have enough information about it, I'm just not gonna go. Which led to a lot of my friends just saying, "Oh, I'm always missing out on things." I played football, and that was an experience as well because now I'm a jock. My freshman year, I was the captain of the freshman team, so that had a level of popularity or notoriety to it. It was just the balance of who am I as a Christian and who am I as a man. And I think as I was journeying throughout high school, I was able to discern like, okay, this isn't a party. This is just a gathering with my teammates. This is homecoming. We're just celebrating, our big football game of the year. Now there were the basement parties that I had to exit out of. There were the extracurriculars that, hey, this is just not my praise. And I think as I stood firm in that, my friends started to protect me. Friends who were also Christians, but were also living worldly because it's high school. They were also protecting me, like, oh no, Nikki's not gonna come. Nikki's good in this space, and then it became easier to continue to walk in my faith. And again, I wasn't like I was doing anything extraordinary. If I was in the locker room, I may have been playing gospel rap. I had discovered gospel rap, which was definitely a good alternative from rap and hip hop. So I would play that. People would be interested. Oh, that's a cool beat. What is that? And that's how I would talk about Christ that way. Or I would pray before a game, and then that was something that the team started doing that I didn't have to initiate. Other members of the football team would initiate. So it became easier to be me without feeling like I was losing out on moments or memories, as they would like to say. Now, is there a part of my flesh that was like, oh, I wish I went to that party, or I wish I went there? Absolutely. I'm not going to say there aren't those moments, but I think as I look back at the journey of my life, and I look back at my story, I'm glad I made those decisions. But transitioning into college was another beast completely.
Well, before we get to college, one, it is extraordinary. It's extraordinary because it's not
Mm.
ordinary for someone in high school at that age to have that maturity and discernment and say, nah, that's not for me. And so I'm curious as to like, did you have other influences that helped you understand that about yourself? Or that's just naturally who you are of like, oh, I get to decide for me.
I think I say this to my mentor all the time. I think I was in an anomaly for about 3 to 4 years where youth ministry in Boston and the Haitian community was at an all time high. Every church had an active youth ministry, every church had an active youth choir. There was a youth conference every other month. We were partnering with brother and sister churches to host events together. So there wasn't time for me to fall out of the rhythm of youth ministry. I was either at choir rehearsal, Bible study, or Sunday morning church, or a youth activity on Saturday. There was no space for me to fall out. Of course, they understood I played football or I was doing a club for school, but if it wasn't outside of like those parameters, I was somewhere in church. We have this saying in Haitian Creole. It's called l'école, l'église, la caille. It means school, church, home. Those are the three L's that you're usually surrounded in. So if I wasn't in a school activity, I was in church. So it was an anomaly because you were just so saturated with the spirit. You had youth leaders that genuinely cared. And not saying that's not the case for a lot of churches, but when you have youth leaders who are in college themselves that have midterms and finals, that are worrying about their own lives, still actively preparing retreats, actively preparing Bible studies, actively preparing conferences, creating spaces for youth to grow, and then coming off the cusp of being curious about my own faith, I was just set up to succeed. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but I'm grateful that was the case for me because it's protected me from a lot. It's healed me from past trauma. It allowed me to have tools to prepare myself for whatever obstacles were going to come my way. Whether I fell or not, I still knew how to prepare myself for those battles and overcome any battles that came my way. So yes, I can only describe it as an anomaly because when I look back at my old church, it's not the same. There's not that same seed in the ground, or someone's churning the soil. It's a different time. So I'm blessed to know that I had those 3 or 4 years at a pivotal moment of my life that set the foundation for where I am today.
Yeah, it's sad that it's an anomaly when I feel like it should be normal, right?
It should be.
Yeah,
It should
yeah.
be.
I call it the golden years too. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, you were probably being born, but like in the 90s in New York, it was like youth revival everywhere. And now,
See,
yeah.
I would love for that to still be the culture, like today, where we're still having youth conferences. Working for a mega church is beautiful, but I love the intimacy of small churches because you can partner with each other. You have 4 or 5 different churches coming together to host an event, and that brings the community together because those are the really inner city kids that are getting the chance to, have a space to worship and also see other kids from their same district just at a different church. So hopefully that culture can come back in the church.
Man, you got some deep insights. Like, so what happened in college?
So college, funny enough, this is why again I'd say I'm glad I walked my faith strongly in high school because even some professors were like, Nikki, don't dorm when you go to college. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I want to be able to experience college. I want to, break out, finally get out of under my parents' house, experience the world. And they just blatantly said, you're not ready for what the world is going to offer you. And I understood it, but I definitely wasn't ready for it. So I eventually went to UMass Boston. It's a university, but it's a commuter school. So they didn't have dorms. It's one of the few UMass Boston campuses that don't have dorms. They have dorms now. Of course, after I left, they have dorms. But when I was going there, they didn't have dorms. They had apartment buildings that they were leasing out directly to the school. So if you wanted to get an apartment building, you could. But it wasn't necessarily the same experience because then you'd have regular people living in your apartment as well. So it wasn't necessarily the same. So I just ended up commuting, and college was different. I didn't have the same protection I had when I was in high school. I was meeting thousands of new people every single day. It's a commuter school, so one person you meet on Monday, if you don't have that same schedule or that same pattern, you might never see them again. So if you don't connect with them immediately, good luck to you. I was still active in youth ministry, but youth ministry was transitioning. The old youth leaders were stepping down, new youth leaders were stepping in. So I was trying to find my way, and I wanted to ask myself, am I still that same God fearing man I was in high school, or was that just a chapter? Was that just an episode? And now I'm going to journey down a new episode. And I spent the first semester kind of to myself, definitely a little bit shy. Most people would tell you that's a lie, but I do have a shy side. So I kind of spent the first semester to myself, stayed in the campus center. And then I remember at the beginning of the spring semester, I was walking down what we call the catwalk at UMass Boston. And there's usually tables for signing up for organizations. And I saw this organization called Crew Christian Fellowship. And I saw some familiar faces, said hi. And that really, it was like, again, I asked God, is there a relationship for me here? Or am I just going to have to like survive the fun, we'll call it, of college? And I found Crew, immediately got plugged in with them, and that kind of became my place, not only to worship, but it also became my place to fellowship and kind of bring people in. We had club spaces right near like the Black Student Center, any other ethnic groups, whether it was Asian, Latino, I think it was Casa Latina. So we had a lot of pull in not just being a Christian organization, but being able to tap into other organizations next to us. And again, I'm a sports guy. I like anime. I enjoy running. I enjoy laughs. I'm a script writer. I'm just also a Christian as well. That's just who I primarily identify myself as. So it's easy to talk to the Black Student Center and talk about pop culture. It's easy to join in with Casa Latina and go to salsa nights or Latin nights and have fun, but always still carry Christ wherever I went. And that became interesting because again, people then started to recognize the Christ in me and wanted to protect that from the fun of college. And I was always so curious, and I still ask myself to this day, God, why'd you protect me so much? What did you not want me to experience that I didn't have to go through months of fasting, months of prayer? And we always talk about learning by trial of fire. Sometimes we learn by just observing the fire and never actually having to get burned. And I'm grateful that I don't have the scars with the lessons. I just have the lessons. And uh, I'm always just curious, God, why'd you have me go this route? I guess I'll know when I meet him in heaven. But college was an interesting experience. I held a worship night, which hadn't happened, I think, in 10 years prior to me arriving at UMass Boston for many reasons. But I had to talk to the school board. I had to discuss with other advisors just to get it approved. I had to show where all the money was coming from and where it was going. I had to vet every guest artist that would have been appearing because of just prior, I guess you'd say, bridges that were burned with the school community. So to do that was a staple. It was as if I was planting a seed back into dead soil again. And I was saying, hey, we're here, because that's what I grew up learning in youth ministry was plant a seed wherever you go. Never be ashamed of the gospel, Romans 1:16. So I did that. That was a momentous night. Friends I knew from other organizations came to support, and it was a beautiful moment. I'm glad I did it. I don't know if it's been done since I've left UMass Boston, but everyone knows that Nicky, when he was at UMass Boston, he represented Christ, and he left a staple, he left a mark there. And I hope that someone else can pick up that mantle and continue to push it forward.
So it's funny that you asked God, like, why did you protect me so much? I think that's why we met, because he did not protect me because he knew I would always crawl back. And so I have all the scars with the lessons. And yeah, sometimes I wish I didn't have the scars, but knowing
Mm,
me, I'm the type that, like, if it's not going to kill me, I want to experience it because I want to know,
mm.
because I'm so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
curious. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, like, I prefer your way of going about college and high school and stuff. Not to say like I had some like crazy experiences,
Mm,
but like, yeah, I think that kind of mentality followed me throughout most of my life until I hit like
mm.
40. So I made a lot of mistakes, and people
Yeah,
keep telling me like, "You're so wise." I'm like, no, these are just the lessons that I had to learn the hard way.
absolutely.
So okay, so like, what were you majoring in college?
So for my undergrad, I majored in exercise and health science. It was kind of a precursor to trying to get into grad school for physical therapy. Am I doing that today? No. But that's what I was doing when I was an undergrad at UMass Boston.
What did you after? Did you pursue PT?
So that's where this kind of journey now leads me to after 2016. So after 2016, I finished graduating UMass Boston. I'm preparing for applications for grad school, and me and my advisor have one more meeting. I'd say at the top of the spring semester. I'm like, hey, so this is my this is re-audit. This is what I've done. You told me that we'll have this conversation now. So, what colleges do you think would be good for me? I wanna look at Duke. I wanna look at BU, MCPHS, UMass Lowell. These are the colleges I'm looking at for my doctorate in PT. And she goes, "Oh, you're missing some core classes. And I'm like, what do you mean? Every semester we've had these conversations. I told you the trajectory of my life. I wanted to be a physical therapist for the Boston Celtics or the New England Patriots. I wanted the white picket fence. I wanted to be made. What do you mean I'm missing courses? And I definitely take accountability of not doing my own due diligence and doing my own research, but you're my advisor. I'm literally paying you to advise me. So for the next, I'd say 12 to 18 months, I'm going between community colleges, fulfilling other prerequisites, whether it's physics 1 and 2, chemistry 1 and 2, orgo, these great classes that I could have fulfilled during my undergrad degree with my tuition. I'm now paying extra for these individual classes. I'm now taking more time and delaying it. And 2016 is also when I joined Jubilee Christian Church. So transition. As I am navigating this, I start to volunteer at a young adult ministry at Jubilee Christian Church. It's still happening today. It's called Influence. And I start there as their social media guy. Just doing some content for them on Instagram, trying to activate Twitter. Twitter was all the rage back then. Still is now, just X, and it's a crazy place. I try to stay out of it as much as I can. So as I'm starting to volunteer for ministry again, coming out of college, I'm now fighting this pull. I take physics 1 and 2. Some colleges accept it, some don't. I take Chem 1 and 2. Some colleges accept it, some don't. So I'm fighting. I'm like, God, what do you have for me? I'm trying to figure it out. I get let go from my job at H&M. I worked there my whole college career. Do some odd jobs here and there, and I wind up at AT&T from 2017 on to 2019. So in that time period, I try to, instead of going to physical therapy school, I try to do a physical therapy assistant program. It's a master's program, not a doctorate program. But it get me still in the same field. I still have my undergrad degree. And I kind of navigate that way. But as I'm facing these closed doors with every opportunity, every school is telling me no. PTA school is having their own requirements. I'm advancing in the kingdom more and more. I start going from the young adult ministry to Sunday mornings, from Sunday mornings to the women's conference that we have, one of our pillar events at Jubilee. Then from that, the men's conference. Now I'm getting more engaged with some of the executive and lead pastors at Jubilee. So as I am finding difficulty in my undergrad degree, which I was like, hey, God, I just want to be a PT. God's like, hey, why don't you just focus where you're growing right now and not where you're trying to force a door to open. So I'd say around 2018, I'm still at AT&T, but I stop. I stopped going to community college. I stopped trying to pursue PTA. I just say, God, I'm going to sit here. I'm just going to focus on videography and photography. That's clearly where you have me growing. I'm going to continue to just grow those seeds in this soil and live there. And by the end of 2018, going to 2019, I have my first, which I didn't know was an interview at the time, but I have my first interview with our lead pastors, Pastor Matt and Mona Thompson. And they're just talking to me, seeing where I'm at, seeing how I'm doing, asking me about the journey of my life. And pretty much it was just the first step to going into full-time ministry. And I started at Jubilee Christian Church in late October, early November of 2019. Why I'm continuing the story is because this leads to my master's degree. As you well know, in 2020, the world shut down. So I got hired to be a social media manager at Jubilee Christian Church. And when the world shut down, I turned into a cinematographer editor as we were, getting online church more and more active and bringing that to life. We had to focus less on social media analytics and more so on how do we keep the church alive? How do we keep hope alive? Not knowing when we're actually going to come back in the building. And we do that for about a year. And my mentor, Pierre Huberson, who's the production director at Jubilee, is like, hey, you got some talent. And I'm like, sure, whatever you believe. He also works at Emerson College, one of the biggest top film schools in the country. And he goes, "You should apply for Emerson." I'm like, "Hey, I already did an undergrad degree. I don't really think I want to do another 4 year." He's like, "No, we have a master's degree. And with your portfolio, you'd get in." I'm like, "I'm just a kid with a camera. I don't think I'm made for Emerson College." And lo and behold, I apply at that spring. I just make the deadline, and I got accepted out of an application process of, I think, 350 to 500 applicants. I was one of 30 that got selected, and I received my master's this past May. I released my first short film, and everyone always asks, "You had a bachelor's degree in health science and you're in filmmaking?" And I just say, God chose a different path. So do I still have a bachelor's degree? Yes. Could I ever go back to it? If that's his will, the bachelor's degree doesn't expire. I have to, retake some exams, update some license, but it's still there. But as of right now, God is telling a story with my filmmaking. He's telling a story through my lens, and that's saving people. That's bringing people to Christ in a different kind of way outside of the typical, worship leader or preacher. And who am I to slow his work down because I don't think that's the ideal form of worship or the ideal path? So, yeah, that's my bachelor's degree. Exercise health science. Still want to be, a physical therapist for the Celtics. They just won a ring. I could have gotten a ring, but, neither here nor there. But yeah, now I have a master's in film and media art, and I'm a Christian filmmaker.
I am thoroughly convinced that storytelling is the future, especially with AI. So you're in
Oh,
the right
absolutely.
field. You're in the right
Yes.
field. What is your short story about?
So my short story tackles the black family. So we've seen in cinema over the decades the typical black absentee father trope, and I think that is a real uh, that's a real lifestyle for people. They grow up in a single parent home. Usually, it's just with the mother, and there's difficulties in how children, both sons and daughters, grow up in that environment. But I've been blessed enough to grow up with a mother and father in the household, but I've had my own difficulties and challenges with growing up with a different generation kind of man. And what did that story look like? How does the modern day son relate to the father who grew up fatherless but is now learning to be a father himself? So my story tackles Jason, who's been estranged from his father for about 10 years since the passing of his mother, and Richard, who lost his wife, doesn't really know how to emotionally communicate with his son anymore because the bridge to his emotions passed when his wife passed. How do these two gentlemen relate? So that's my short. It tackles a lot of subjects in 20 minutes. I leave an ambiguous ending because why not? Why not have people curious about what happens next? And it really focuses on reconciliation. And I love that word because reconciliation doesn't necessarily mean that everything's patched up, but it's the start to something. Sometimes we look to receive, apologies or look for people to always feel, what we want to feel. Sometimes someone just needs to understand whether they'll still agree with your truth. There has to be an understanding. If you can understand where I'm coming from, I can understand where you're coming from. We may not still agree, but we can reconcile something and move forward. And that's what my film, whether I did it intentionally or accidentally, I think what I love more so about my film is the conversations that it's led to, the messages that I've received from whether it's immediate family members or friends who came to the private screening on, "Hey, I reached out to my dad today. We haven't talked in a few years, but after seeing your film, we finally had a conversation in the first time in a few years." Or I reached out to my son, and I didn't even know that it would reach the older generation, but fathers and mothers reached out to me saying, "Hey, I'm reaching out to so and so. I'm reaching out to my sister. I'm reaching out to an old friend because we don't know. We don't know the day or the hour, and why not do it today and at least attempt to reconcile?" So my film is, it's still creating waves for the people who've seen it. Right now, I'm in a film festival journey, waiting for my first acceptance to a festival. But I think this film will speak to every generation, every color and creed and race. And I think it matters to also the Black community of seeing that fathers are still in the household. How do we understand each other, even though we have different generations and different experiences? In a nutshell,
Yeah, reconciliation is not letting the past determine your future. What's the title of your short?
the invite.
The Invite. And where can people find it? Or is it on YouTube?
So right now, I'm debating if I want to release it until it's at least made one festival run. But I do have a private link, so if anyone ever wants to watch it, it's a simple. You can email me, and I can leave that email with you, and I can send you the private link, and you can watch it there. But it's hidden on my YouTube channel and on my Vimeo account.
Every guy has a father issue, so so it'll speak to everyone.
Everyone
Yeah,
has a
yeah.
dad issue. Everyone has a dad issue. And that's why I love it. Everyone has different like father dynamics, and everyone. I grew up in a culture where you were at home with your father, or if your parents were split, you still had him in your life. But it was like that. My father didn't grow up with his father, and he had to become a father at 13 for for his younger brothers. So he's never known the difficulty of being a son. So how does someone who's never been a son understand a son and father that son? So that's why I think the story speaks so well, because it brings that group of people together, and that group is much larger than we think. Yeah, I can send you the link.
That's really good. Do you mind if I keep that in? Because I want to get into your relationship with your father.
Go for it.
Okay. So your relationship to your father kind of inspired this movie. What
Mm.
about your relationship? Like, what do you remember about growing up with your dad?
Okay. So in terms of how my relationship with my father inspired the movie, so 2016 was a difficult year. We talk about transitions, getting ready to graduate college. I also, at the top of the year, my house caught on fire. This exact room that I'm sitting in was charred to a crisp. It was unrecognizable. Got a phone call while I was at work. Come to the house immediately. The house is on fire. So for 9 months, we were homeless. My parents still paying a mortgage on this house and paying rent on a small 2 room situation. A family of 5 that's used to their own space is now clung together. 3 months after the fire, my father experienced a brain aneurysm. I'm not ashamed of what I'm about to say because it's my truth, but it took me 3 days to go see him. I was the last immediate family member to go see him because I just have seen my father always so strong. He's always gotten back up. He's always fought, and to know that he was tied up into, tubes coming out of his brain, drain the blood from his brain, IVs, all these things. It was very hard for me to want to go see him because I was afraid, is this the last image I'm going to have of him? So the movie was inspired. One of the early drafts of my short film was, if this was the last conversation you would have, what would you say? The movie has evolved from that concept, but that was the initial seed that birthed my film, was that moment of me standing in the hospital room talking to my father and seeing, Willie make it out of. He's still with us today. He still annoys me as much as he's annoyed me over the years. But it was that moment of, what would we say to each other if we had one more last conversation? Growing up with a Haitian father is not for the weak, to say the least. He is very strong. He is very proud. He is very wise. He doesn't take no as an answer. It's yes sir, no sir. It's when you see me, you come kiss me on the cheek. You say good morning. You say good night. You let me know when you're going. If I don't approve of something, there's not really a conversation. It's I said no. That's really the end of it. Now, if I can get my mom to say yes, she can reverse that no. My dad was a photographer by trade, which, funny enough, filmmaker now. Clearly, we see where the seeds come from. My father was a photographer by trade, a taxi and limo driver on the side in between gigs. He is one of 11 children. His older brother, he's number 2 in that line. His older brother passed away at a young age, and then he became the older brother. There was never a consistent father figure in the house, so he was the father. So my father's really just known how to, and he's always known how to make things happen so that the family's okay. It's always family first with him, even if it makes us uncomfortable. It was, and at a later age, I began to understand it. When I was younger, I was like, that's no fun. Like, dad's always saying no, we're not able to go these places, we're not able to do these things. But it was him always just seeing a bigger picture, seeing the longevity of the plan working out. And not everything always worked out, but under his hard shell, I understood the soft love that was there. And uh, it's not easy getting to those deep layers, but once you finally understand the intent and the heart behind it, it made it a little bit easier. Being his son, we connected with our love of sports. He loved soccer, so I played soccer growing up until I went to high school and then transitioned to football. He was a little bit mad, but he liked Tom Brady, so it worked out. He was like, okay, I guess if you're playing the sport Tom Brady plays. But yeah, my father, a devoted servant, a preacher. He's been preaching, I think, most of my life. Recently got ordained as a pastor last year, so he put a Bible in my hands when I was young. Every Friday was a nightly service at the house until I started youth ministry. We had to learn a verse every week. So all the verses that are ingrained in my spirit have come from him saying, let's learn another verse, let's learn another verse. But there definitely were tough times where I just wanted to be a kid. I just wanted to go play out with my friends, and it was no, stay inside the house, or I have a photography gig. You're gonna just stand on the side while I try to make this money, and help. I'll bring ends meet. So there's a hardness to my father, but in that same vessel, there's still a softness and a care and a love, and that's where we relate on.
I'm also very convinced that God chooses our parents. I mean, obviously, because
Mhm.
we're born, we don't have a choice. But I
Exactly.
also think it's because He's trying to teach us something about ourselves. So, like for you,
Mm.
what did you learn about yourself through your father?
What I learned about myself through my father, ooh, I learned how to carry myself with pride. I think if that's one thing that I enjoy is the name Thibault. There's so much pride in that name. There's so much history in that name. My father didn't meet his father until he was 36 years old, and even in that, his father asked him, "Hey, because of the circumstances, do you still want my last name? I didn't know you existed, but I'm happy you found me. We connected." And my father was like, "I've already established my own last name. I'm honored that you would give that to me, but I'm gonna keep the last name Thibault." And even in that simple act is taking ownership and pride of who you are. And that's where I've been able to take ownership and pride of me being a Haitian American, me being a Christian, me being an an avid lover for film. I take pride in the things that I enjoy, that I reside with, and that's because I saw my father, who no matter what whatever he stuck by, whether he's wrong or right, he took pride in where he stood. And I think we kind of lose that. We like to be pliable, we like to be bendable, but sometimes we have to stand on our convictions. Whether they're right or wrong, sometimes we have to stand on our convictions. And I think where I've learned is to discern when I'm wrong and maybe I shouldn't stand on this certain conviction. But if I believe something to be true and I know it is true, don't bend. Stand on your truth, because you don't know who needs you to take that truth to the next level so that they can find their truth. So my father's taught me to stand on my convictions, and that's one of the biggest lessons he's taught me. Oh, he's also taught me how to respect and love. So him and my mom have a great relationship. They've been married for, I think, over 30 plus years now. I'm 30. Well, I'm 31 next month. So they've been married a little over 33, 34 years. And marriage is hard. Marriage is difficult. I'm not married yet. Hopefully soon. But my father has shown that, you have to always go back. Even when I may not like you, but I love you. And my father's shown me that, it just takes time. It takes effort. It takes an everyday battle of getting up and intentionally loving your partner, loving your woman, and being there for her. As Christ loves the church, you love your wife. You submit to her as Christ submits to the church. And um, It's probably one of the biggest lessons I take into how I try to mold my relationship in preparation for one day being a husband myself.
Can you give me an example that you remember of your father doing that?
So my mother is a nurse, so she works long hours. So it's easy for typical or traditional relationships that there are certain roles that men carry in the relationship. There are certain roles that women carry in the relationship. My father, he could have, when he came to the country, he could have focused on finishing his bachelor's degree and kind of advancing his career. He said, no, my photography can still travel with me. I'll pick up taxi and limo driving, and he paid for her schooling so that she can get her associate's degree in nursing. As she was studying, he was taking care of me and my brother. He was bringing us to school. He was preparing dinner. My family's not the prototypical traditional family. My dad does a lot of the everyday housework while my mom goes into work and takes care of us that way. My dad's the one that takes us to parent teacher conferences. He's the one that puts himself second, whereas it goes against everything he's grown up as. It goes against everything he knows. He says, if this is the way that our family is going to survive, I will be second so that you can be first. And even when my mom had to go back to school to get her bachelor's, he just took on more of the load so that she wouldn't feel it, so that we wouldn't feel it as children. And I know he still wrestles with that. I know it's still against his inner philosophy of what a man should be in the household, but he knows that he just wrestles with that with God. And one day we'll understand. It may not be in this world, but one day we'll understand the next world. But he just chooses to put my mom's wants and needs first above his own, while he still chases his dreams. But he knows if the family's going to survive, this is how we're going to do it.
Dude, I really like your dad more than you. Dude, like he's right all the time now, man. If you can find a
Man,
man who can actually do that, like
yeah.
visibly lay down his wants for the needs of his family and especially his wife, that's just like the most amazing things I always see. And because it's so rare,
hmm
um, man, you had such a special childhood.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. I I love that that's my story. Again, I ask why it's my story, but I love that that's my story. It's never perfect. There are very hard days. We talked about scars earlier. I have my own scars. Still in high school, college, even as an older adult. But the way I see my dad go through life, the way I see my mom honor my dad, even though she's the one that's punching in and out. Uh, I have a unique story, and I love that that's the story that I get to bring to other people and bring a new perspective, a new voice into the room or into the chat.
So what are you hoping for at Faithly?
I just want to connect as I continue to grow. I love that we have now entered the day and age where connecting with people isn't always physical. It can be virtual now. And I just kind of want to connect with my brothers and sisters in Christ in a different kind of way. I have an amazing community here in Boston, but with day and age and the internet, my community could grow rapidly. So with Faithly, I'm just looking to connect with a different group of Christians and kind of have conversations like these where we can talk about our walk, we can talk about our experiences, talk about life, and see how better we can advance the gospel in our own different avenues. I'm a cinematographer, director, deacon, professor. I teach at Emerson College now. Even there, I still was known as the church boy, and that's what I love. And whether it was high school, undergrad, or graduate school, I was always known as the church boy. That's what I still want to continue. How do I thrive? So I'd love to connect with other people through Faithfully. Maybe I'll connect with another professor, or I'll connect with a doctor here. I don't know, but I'm just looking for that connection.
And how can we be praying for you?
Right now, if you talk about transition, I'm intentional with that word because even now I'm going through seasons of transition. And one of my transitions is kind of coming out as a director. And, where does that avenue lead me? I love the industry that I'm stepping into, but I know the industry I'm stepping into doesn't necessarily put Christ first. So, how do I continue to walk in these spaces? How do my actions speak for that? So just prayer as I'm walking into a new industry, prayer for my film that it reaches the right people, so that I can continue to tell stories like this and maybe tell even feature films that have Christ resonating in it. I think though the word Christ isn't said in my film, you feel something. And that's the curiosity that I was curious about at 14 that I'm trying to have someone be curious about as they see my work.
Love it. Thanks, man. This was great.
Thanks, Dan. No problem.
That's it for the podcast. Bye, guys.